Mamacita, mamacita. Ooh, girl. Hey, what's your name? What's your name is, huh? Yo, what's going on? Hey, this is Tiffany Thomas.
And this is Richard Thomas.
She's slow to the game, y'all. Anyway, this is Tiffany Thomas.
And this is Richard Thomas.
And we want to thank you for being here for the Lionheart Institute podcast. This is part two of accountability. You're going to love it. It's talking about the cancel culture. It's also talking about accountability, particularly in law enforcement.
Right.
Which is so invaluable. But there's a bunch of different areas that we touch on the back end of it. You're going to want to be sure to stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And like, subscribe, and comment to this video.
Enjoy part two.
Here we goes. Okay,
right? I have to tell you something so funny because I don't think I told you this when I read it. But I read this article from Pennsylvania that they found voter fraud in Pennsylvania. But get this.
It's time to restructure my whole thinking. So come on, break it down to me now.
It was from the Republicans.
Oh, man. Sucky-ducky now.
The voting fraud came from the Republicans. And when they were asked about it, their whole thing is, this is literally what they said. Well, voting fraud is voting fraud, and we need to change the laws to protect us from voting fraud. When they were the ones who committed the fraud. I literally I just couldn't believe
cheating is cheating.
I was like, are they really saying, well, even though we committed it, it's still fraud, so we still need to fix the system? I'm sorry. It was just too much. It was too much. It really was. Oh my gosh, it was priceless. But anyway, that was a side note, but it was really stinking hilarious. But look, what Kelly Townsend, I don't agree with her support of a voter suppression bill by any means, but I commend her for holding the GOP accountable, saying, hey, let's see the proof before we make these changes.
If there's smoke, there's supposed to be fire.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so, she has gotten quite a bit of heat, and the GOP in Arizona is pretty upset over this whole situation. But I commend her for that because we need more of that in politics. We need people not afraid to hold their own parties accountable when they are doing things that are not okay.
So here we are in a world where obviously she's the first voice. I'm hoping that there's other Republicans that catch trend of this and they're like, wait a minute.
Hope so.
Because here's the deal. The Republican Party, which I was a part of.
Right, both of us.
For a voting Republican for too many years probably, right, holding out. They got the Brexit campaign.
Oh, yeah.
$20 million they raised or some nonsense to it, right? I was on the other opposite side of that, right, of common sense in some senses. Yeah. However, why are people protesting? I guess that the whole thing that leaves the world confused, right? You got voter suppression.
Right.
You've got police brutality. Yeah. Right. You have black people being killed left and right. Right. And I know that to the Republican mind that's offensive. It's a trigger word.
Right.
When I would say black people are being killed left and right, they would say you have to get your statistics right.
Right. More white people are killed than black people.
Sure. And I get that and I understand that perspective. Right. My question is why in the hell are you okay with that?
Right.
Why are you okay?
Why would anybody be okay with that?
Why are you okay telling me when we see the violence that's perpetuated against the black community, when we see the unnecessary death, when we see the unnecessary cruelty, when we see the abuse, then for a white person to turn around and say to me, well, it's worse for white people. No, it's not true. I don't believe that statistically. I don't see that played out in history, right?
Yeah.
However, if it is true, give me 10 seconds of common sense and tell me, how are you okay with that? How are you okay with that? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah,
right?
It doesn't.
Because protests, we're not just protesting, right?
Right.
Because we have nothing else to do on a Sunday morning, right? We're not just protesting because we want to get together for barbecue, and COVID has made it so inconvenient that we figure, hey, let's protest instead of having barbecues, because if we have barbecues, then they're going to give us tickets because we're not wearing masks. But if we protest, then we can get the best of both worlds, right? That's it. So unfold to us, why do people protest?
Yeah, I think it needs to be understood why people are protesting. And I think people just, look, the truth is white America does not like the idea of a bunch of black people and people of color walking down the street and protest. It makes them uncomfortable.
Well, I appreciate that. I can respect that, right? It makes me feel odd sometimes living in the world that I've lived in to see, Super Bowl winning cities, right? Coming towards me if I'm not wearing the same jersey as they're wearing. Right. Y'all burning cop cars and flipping over cars.
I think people forget about those things.
Hockey teams win it, the city burns down.
Right.
You win a Super Bowl, Philadelphia, the whole city's on fire. All kinds of crazy stuff. I can understand that they're uncomfortable with the protest, right? It's not, the voice of a protest is loud, it's strong, and it captures your attention.
It definitely does.
However, on the flip side of it, they weren't comfortable with Colin Kaepernick's approach either.
No, and he was silent, took a knee.
He didn't bother nobody.
Nope.
As a matter of fact, reporters went to him to ask him questions, right?
He didn't broadcast it to the world.
So here we are, where we're trapped betwixt and between.
Yeah.
Where really it's not so much that they don't like the protest.
Right.
They don't like what we're protesting about, which is protecting our communities.
Yeah, the truth is protests are about bringing awareness of injustice. That is what it is all about. It is bringing accountability and awareness for the injustice that is happening, especially right now to people of color. And the truth is, it is the lack of accountability in law enforcement that people are protesting right now. The fact that black and brown people are being murdered by cops and there's no accountability. So there was an interesting statistic that I found the other day, and it was a breakdown of the cost of the riots in 2020. So I heard a lot of people talking about the devastation.
Protests converted into riots, right?
The protests, which are converted into riots.
Yeah.
So I heard a lot of people talk about the devastation in the cities, right?
Sure.
That these were happening in. So they estimated that in 2020, the riots cost about $1 billion worth of damage.
It's amazing.
Now, on the flip side of that, we say, okay, again, why are people protesting and riot? Well, they're protesting over the deaths of black and brown people by law enforcement. So let me give you another statistic. In addition to the $1 billion paid out in damages for these riots and protests, another $80 million was paid out in blood money to families of people who were murdered by police officers. So let's talk about that for a minute. $1 billion in damage was for people saying, hey, why aren't cops being held accountable? Plus another $80 million being paid out to cover up those murders. So cops aren't being held accountable. So the question is that worth it? Is it worth continuing this cover-up and this lack of accountability to pay out $1 billion in damages to be heard, to pay out $80 million just in 1 year alone to families who family members were murdered by these cops? Is that acceptable to you?
So powerful.
Because to me, I think it would be a whole lot more simple to just address and hold these police officers accountable
100%.
And prevent the deaths of these black and brown people. And guess what? Then we've got no protests. We've got no riots. We don't have $1 billion being paid out in damages. We don't have $80 million in 1 year being paid out to family members.
You know what's even more horrific than that to me is that $600 million of that was caused by white supremacists.
Right. See, people forget that. We hear the Black Lives Matter movement and how Black Lives Matter caused these damages, but the truth is 53% of all damages and death last year
530 million, I'm sorry, then,
were caused by white supremacist and white nationalist groups. These are just the facts. These are not our opinions, people. But all we hear from people is Black Lives Matter and Antifa protests. They caused all this violence, these deaths, these murders, all this stuff that happened during these protests were caused by them, but it's just simply not true. So if you're going to hold them accountable, well, you need to hold everybody accountable.
2020 was a unique year.
Yeah,
so you have COVID, you have lockdown, you have, I mean, at this point, it seems like, and I know it's not quite that, a death a day. I mean, you can't stop grieving one death before you're grieving another one. Okay,
or two more.
And we're gonna get to this in the Derek Chauvin video. I really want to address it. So please make sure you tune into that video, because I'm going to be addressing black on black crime a little bit on that as well, because I think it's important that we touch on that. However, we have this Colosseum mindset going on in the world today, where it's just entertainment, right? It's just we have media rushing to it. We have the thirst for blood out of the American communities. It seems like the society. Can you share on that a little bit? Because you were bringing that up to me the other day.
Yeah, I just kind of thought about it. I was just disgusted by people's comments, both on a professional level and just normal average Americans, about the conviction of Derek Chauvin, and their responses were disgusting to me. And I heard so much of, he was a drug addict, he got what he deserves. You know, well, he died of an overdose. The police officer didn't do anything to do this. You know, just hearing all these things, and I thought to myself, wow, when did we become a society that is okay with a Roman Colosseum mentality? I mean, Romans were notorious for their Colosseums and their gladiators and throwing criminals or slaves to the lions or tigers in these Colosseums and watching them be ripped apart. I mean, they enjoyed this. They thrived off of this violence, and it was all justified. It was entertainment for them. Now, I'm not saying that we are entertained by watching people be murdered, but what I am saying is, when did we become a society that justifies the perpetrator's actions, and we turn the victim into the criminals?
Yeah, tell it.
Look, here is the reality. George Floyd was never on trial here, people.
Come on.
Ever. And all I have heard for the last year is his name being torn apart, his character, his name pulled through the mud because of his past and his criminal record, which was completely irrelevant to his death. But we made it about that. We justified his murder because he had a criminal record, because he had a drug addiction. We justified this to ourselves, to the people. The media thrived on it. I mean, we can thank we can thank Donald Trump Jr. He was the one who released George Floyd's criminal records minutes after the video came out about his murder.
Yeah.
He made sure everybody saw him as a criminal so people would justify his death.
Heartbreaking.
So when did we allow this to become acceptable? When did we say that police have the right to be the executioners and justify it? When did we give them this much power and accept it?
Now, that's an interesting question, because it probes back to, how do you see the police force? Where was the police force created in your mind? See, because for most people in minority communities, we have never seen them as friendlies.
Right.
There was a short time, particularly on the East Coast, where there was a tremendous campaign up north to hire black officers.
Right, yeah.
They came from our communities. They drank our water. They ate our food.
Yes.
They shopped at our stores. They went to our basketball games together, and so forth. And so there was a short period of time where there was a decision made by the community: we're going to try to infiltrate the police force, right? And that's probably happened half a dozen times throughout history, that there were wise police chiefs who said, hey, if we're going to really affect policing in these communities, we're going to have to get people that look like them, speak like them.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
And it's a cultural thing. It's not just a race thing, right?
Right.
It's not just a skin tone thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's a cultural expression thing to understand, how do I even de-escalate a situation where the cat's just telling me hi and I'm thinking he's actually threatening me, right? So there's some of that is important and valuable and would make a huge impact on policing, right? But for many of us, we know that they were in most cases, particularly from the South, police forces were created by the Karens of the era who said, "Bring my slaves home."
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
From white business owners in the North who said, we have to have capitalism at its highest form. We have to have a poor community. Yeah. Enforce violence in that community. Right. And so you have to look at where police officers that for truly our friends. Right. And that's a whole different study. Right. That I encourage you to go into, because the way you enter into a relationship, this is very important for people to understand. The way you enter into a relationship is how that relationship will oftentimes function. Right. Yeah. So I told my little girl from the very beginning, never enter into a relationship from a position of weakness. Yep. Because when you enter that relationship with that person from a position of weakness, they will abuse you. They will take advantage of you. They will see you as a victim, even though you may not define yourself as a victim. They will abuse you because you've allowed them to be the brutal force or voice in that relationship. And so here we are in a time in society where we are screaming as protesters. Yeah. Change is necessary, and change is necessary now. We will not tolerate anything shy of complete reform.
You know, I saw this article the other day, and it was shocking. And it was talking about the funding to the American police departments. And it broke it down by different countries and militaries. What their military, their budgets for their militaries were compared to the budget for the U.S. Police Department. The U.S. Police Departments came in third on the list for the highest budgets.
It's crazy.
Only below, I can't remember now which country was number one, but the United States was number 2 for their U.S. military budget, and then the U.S. Police Department, it could be right.
China or Russia.
Were number 3. Now, how does the police department end up on this top 10 list at number 3 as the highest budget over military? That is a problem, people.
Our police force has been entirely militarized.
Yes, when we militarized our police, when we gave them military-grade weapons and systems and things, it changed everything. I do not believe that our police department should have military-grade weapons at all. Now, if you want to deal with SWAT or undercover or certain aspects of our police department, okay, I can see sometimes the need for that. But our basic officers who are on the streets every day do not need military-grade
body armor in their car.
No, absolutely not. You know,
that's an intense debate.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I heard the other day I saw a meme on Facebook, and it was a picture of a police officer walking away and leaving his gun and badge on his car and saying, "What are you going to do when all the good cops are gone?" So I thought about this post for a second, and I thought to myself, we are calling for police reform. And conservatives hear us saying, defund the police.
Sure.
There is a difference between defund the police and police reform. And the problem is, where are the good cops now? Mm-hmm. So people hear all the time, there's a lot of good cops. But when good cops are not holding bad cops accountable, they are no longer good cops. If they are seeing somebody, a fellow officer, committing a crime or doing something that he should not or she should not be doing, they need to be holding each other accountable. They already are held to higher standards because they are here to protect and serve us. They are not here to execute us.
Come on.
And I really want to point this out because I think people need to really understand. They're saying if we start convicting, and I heard people say this, if we start convicting officers for doing their jobs, then officers are going to be afraid to do their jobs. And we definitely are going to be in trouble if officers aren't doing their jobs.
Now, see, that is the key, is to define what is their job. Right? Because their job is not to take my life.
Yes.
Their job is certainly not to take my children's life.
Absolutely.
Their job is to, based on most TV shows I've ever watched, based on most inscriptions that I've seen on the side of police buildings, on the side of cars, is to serve and to protect.
And that's what...
Now, I don't know. Maybe some of them have on the inside of that door,
some
kill
different.
as many as you can along the way.
Yeah.
However, in what their mission statement is to the general population, which is how they got my vote, which is how they got their check, right, was to protect and to serve.
Yes.
Right? And I get that it's an impossible job. It is a difficult job in a violent world, right? Yeah. But how can we expect these poor police officers, male, female, to do their job on 6 weeks of training?
Yeah.
Right? How can we expect them to do their job when they're not held accountable to be in top physical shape? Right? The reality is fatigue turns cowards into all of us. Yeah. Right? And so when you think you're going to get your ass kicked, we cannot reduce it to the simplest of solutions and pretend that it's all bad parenting. Right? That it's all bad neighborhood. When you are dealing with bias and you are dealing with assumptions that make you act quicker than you should in their responses, because they're so overwhelmed with fatigue and fear. I don't pretend to know all the answers.
Right.
What I do know is that it has to stop. Accountability has to be at the core of it, holding the individual police officers, holding chiefs, holding lieutenants, holding the training system. The gal who shot taser. Right? That's a training issue. Or it's a murder issue.
I mean, she was a veteran on the force. She knew
for 26 years training people.
She knew the difference between.
So now that's a fatigue issue. She's making $95,000 a year. She's earning $95,000 a year. So it's not as though she's not paid enough to take a vacation.
Yeah.
It's not as though she's not paid enough to get her own personal education or training. It's that we're not holding these people accountable.
Well, I want to share a quick story, because I think it's relevant. There was a situation in Westminster, California Police Department the other day. There was a cop multiple cops were called to the scene, and there was a woman there that was being arrested. I'm not quite sure the whole story. She was trying to chase down a dog or something, and something escalated with this situation. But anyway, this cop who was first on the scene has her in handcuffs, and he is seen punching her multiple times in the face. And so she starts to fight back because she's being hurt and she's being attacked and she's handcuffed and defenseless. So she starts fighting back.
Survival mode.
Because she goes into survival mode, absolutely. Sure. Well, 2 more cops show up on the scene. Now, they see this cop beating up on this handcuffed woman, and they run over there and they rip this cop off her and hold him accountable for his inappropriate behavior.
Now, the truth is the guy's adrenaline is probably skyrocketing, right? He's probably in a fight or flight mode of his own, right? He hasn't seen a psychologist for 20 years. I don't know how long the guy's been on the force, right? There's a lot of reasons, but reasons do not equal excuses, right? They still have to be accountable for their job. And so if that means counseling, that means counseling. If it means seeing a psychologist, that means seeing a psychologist. If it means getting more time off, it means taking more time off. Whatever the formula for reform is, and I'm not the guy saying defund anything. As a matter of fact, if it costs us more money, it costs us more money. But there's no reason that these police officers should be working the hours that they're working without getting any physical training, without getting any enhanced educational training, without seeing a psychologist on a regular basis, right? We say that their job is tough. Well, let's get them the help that they need so they can do their job effectively, because our children's lives are at stake. And the reason why it's been a moot point is because for so long it wasn't white children's lives that were at stake. It's only been black people's children that were at stake, or minorities' children that were at stake.
Sure.
Listen to me, white America. The economy is becoming such to where very shortly the line of race is going to be blurred because of economics, and violence is going to begin to creep up the scale, because we're going to have only haves and only have-nots. The middle class has protected America for the form of racism that has isolated most of white America. That isolation because of wealth, the wealth gap, is going to close, and it's closing now, and there's going to be violence all up and down the scale. And so we have to hold them accountable. What are other areas? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about accountability within police force.
Sure.
But there's other areas that need accountability.
Oh my gosh.
Can you just list a few of them?
Yeah.
And then we'll maybe go into, if you comment down below if those are areas you'd like to see us make a video on.
Yeah, we have a lot of systemic racist issues going on in this country. We need accountability in our medical systems, in our employment systems, in our education systems, housing, judicial system especially. We know that one has a lot of issues. But we need to hold the people who are responsible for these systems accountable. The people who help fund these systems, the people who benefit from these systems need to be held accountable to fix them, because they are so disproportionate between white and people of color. And I know part of the problem, I hear this all the time from people. I hear people say, why am I always being called a racist when I comment on a post or I respond to somebody with my opinion? I'm not a racist. Why is everybody calling me a racist? And here's what I have to say to you. You may not be a racist, but you are responding through the lenses of a person who has experienced white privilege their whole life. So when you respond from your lenses, you are going to come off as bigoted or racist. People, we have to start looking through the lenses of the people who are suffering from this. People who are on the receiving end of racism and bigotry, who are oppressed from these systems and who are being treated unfairly from these systems. We need to step out of our privileged lives that we have had and see it from a different perspective. So I encourage you, if you are talking to somebody or you're responding on a post and you're feeling passionate and fiery, and I know all about that, so I get it, but take a second and think about how you sound coming across to somebody who has suffered from these systemic systems. Somebody who has lost loved ones to an unjust judicial system. Somebody who has lost their spouse or loved ones from an unequal medical system. So think about where they are coming from before you decide to type in from your anger and your hostility about how ridiculous you think this is or how unjust you think this is. Let me tell you, it is nothing compared to the person who you are trying to respond to, what they are feeling. We are so used to living in these bubbles that we don't even know that we're in them half the time. We don't recognize that there is a whole nother world of people who have suffered when we did not have to. We benefited from their suffering. So I am not saying that you are a racist. I don't know all of you. I don't know your heart. But what I am saying is think before you speak. Think about who you're speaking to and who you are speaking about. And try to see from their perspective why they feel what they feel. Instead of us being so strong in our opinions that we have to be right, we have to be heard, and are angered when people say that we're racist. It's about accountability. It's about holding yourself. It's about holding your neighbor. It's about holding all of these systems that built this country. It's about holding them accountable. This is not about liberals versus conservatives. This is not about politics. This is about humanity. This is about the human race and American citizens in this country being treated with respect and with humanity and be treated as equals. And everybody needs to just get out of this political nightmare going on and stop thinking it from a perspective of conservative and stop thinking about it from a perspective of liberal, and see people as human beings. And ask yourself, when did we become okay justifying murder, justifying racism, justifying oppression because of a person's color of their skin or because of their past or their life that they have lived? We are not their judge. We are not their juror, and we are not their executioner. That is not our job.
Come on, baby girl. That's some powerful stuff. Listen, we are in an age where we need accountability.
Yes.
And you say, gosh, man, the way you talk about it, you're so passionate about it. Just
I know.
You live it.
I live it every day.
There's a slap in the face of reality. It's why they call it woke. Right. It's and waking up in the morning, it's not easy for you.
No,
right?
It's not.
15 times you'll hit the snooze button.
Probably.
Right? Mm-hmm. I got to tempt you with making love every morning to wake you up. It's a brutal reality. I'm just kidding. But, you got to smell the coffee. Yeah. You got to know that there is action happening, that life is flowing, right? But I think a lot of America's in that situation, right?
Yeah.
We've hit the snooze button so long.
Yeah.
To where the kids are downstairs running rampant.
Yeah.
Right? We've got liberals that have risen up out of the lack of attention given to the topic.
Yeah.
That are out of pocket probably.
Yeah.
Right? We have a generation of conservatives who are so frustrated with it that they're turned into Trumpists.
Yeah.
Who are kissing cousins with white supremacists.
Yeah.
Right? We have a world screaming white power, and white power doesn't mean all of a sudden get together a bunch of white people sing Kumbaya. It means hate everybody else.
Yeah.
Right? You got black people screaming black power. Right? You got a world getting mad because you say Asian lives matter. Right. Black lives matter.
Yeah.
Blue lives matter. Mm. All lives matter, and they're arguing like their lives are at stake on it on Instagram and Facebook and social media. Never once really stopping to do what you just said. Seek first to understand, and then to be understood. America, we have, I believe, the greatest country in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay? I'm biased. I know I'm biased. We have the greatest military. I think about the fights that I've gotten in with people that have served in our great country.
Right.
In the military. It breaks my heart because no matter how racist they may be, I value and respect. And I'm not saying that they, not all the people I've gotten into arguments that are in the military are, because most of them aren't.
Right.
Right. But I've also had the best dinners with rednecks. I mean, I'm talking about real rednecks.
Yeah, I know.
Right? I'm talking about hillbillies from West Virginia.
Yeah.
Right? I'm talking about people where my best friend growing up, the first time I met his dad was in overalls with grease from his fingertips to his elbows, dreaming about being NASCAR someday.
Yeah.
Right? And the furthest thing from my world, right? I've seen unity work. I've seen the beauty of people that are of different nationalities and backgrounds coming together. I've seen the beauty of a football team that won a national championship with some of them from Texas and some of them from the inner city of Los Angeles and some of them from redneck country, mountains, and they've come together for a cause and a purpose. We need to come together with a cause and a purpose, and it's called loving each other.
It's love, respect, and seeing people for who they are.
The beauty.
The beauty
value
in each of them. I mean, one of my best friends in Georgia when I lived there was a beautiful, beautiful young black woman, and people would stare at us like, how are you two friends?
10, 15 years ago, sure.
People were just kind of confounded how her and I were friends because we were so opposite and we came from opposite ends of the world. And yet we found love and respect for each other in the beauty of who each other was. And it was such a beautiful friendship and an unlikely friendship. And
they say that, opposites attract.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the scale, the musical scale, for instance, it's amazing how oftentimes you can take something from the far right of a keyboard and the far left of a keyboard, and you find a way to make that harmonize.
Yeah.
Right? And when you find harmony in life, and that's really bringing different notes and different sounds and different textures and different skin tones together, it's a beautiful world that we live in.
It's about love. It's about holding people accountable, but do it in love, our country and to each other.
And love for yourself first.
Yes.
Right? It doesn't begin by loving somebody else. It begins by loving yourself, valuing yourself, and I've never been a proponent or a believer that there should be white shame or white guilt.
Not at all.
Or white self-hate. I've never certainly bought into the idea that blacks should feel that guilt and that shame that's been perpetuated on them forever.
Absolutely.
We need to rise above all that.
Yes.
Man, what a powerful episode. Episode 2. I guess this would be episode 2. Must have turned into. Right. So thankful that you participated in this 2-part series. If you're just catching us on the flip side of it, go back and watch part 1. There's some great stuff in the middle of it.
Definitely.
And certainly we're doing an episode on Derek
Chauvin.
and the whole trial and just how has rocked America in so many ways. I encourage you to see that one. I know that that's going to be up and available around the same time period. I just started a new Coaching the Champion, which is more of my rah-rah side, so I can give some of my motivation and love for all people out and get away from politics and current events and so forth. Just some more timeless truths that we live by and we want to profess. And then I know Tiffany's working on a new project. It's just in the fundamental stages, so we're not going to say too much about it. But young women, it's time for you guys to gather together, have a little bit of a community where you can inspire one another and really be empowered, moving towards love. And so anyway, thank you so much for being a part of this episode. Please do like, comment, and share. We're still looking for subscribers, and when you subscribe, please do note down below, comment, hey, I just became a subscriber today.
Yeah, we always love to respond and interact with you all. It means the world to us, so thank you.
I'm Richard Thomas.
And I'm Tiffany Thomas.
And thank you for participating in the Lionheart Institute podcast today. This was Thomas Table Talks.
We'll see you soon.
Amen.